On March the 14th, 2014, workers at a recycling plant in Anaheim, California, were aghast when they discovered something that stopped them in their tracks.
They thought they saw a mannequin on one of the conveyor belts, and upon closer inspection, they realized this was a human body.
The victim was identified as 21-year-old Jeray Estep, a sex worker from Modesto, California.
I think that this was a person who probably, sadly, wrong place at the wrong time because of the nature of her work.
As police link the killing to the disappearance of another 3 missing women, Stephen Dean Gordon, a convicted paedophile, was named as the prime suspect.
Stephen Gordon is one dangerous individual. He's molested children, he's an abductor, he's an all-round predator.
Gordon had formed a dangerous friendship with another sex offender, and the pair had been on a deadly rampage.
I believe he's evil because he looked these women in the eyes, he saw them take their last breath, and still that didn't make him feel guilty enough to stop doing that.
Stephen Dean Gordon had been unveiled as one of the world's most evil killers. In February 2017, Stephen Dean Gordon was sentenced to death for the murder of 4 sex workers in California. His crimes had begun 25 years earlier, when Gordon had been working at a family amusement park. But beneath the facade, he was hiding a ghastly secret. It was his own sister who went to the police, accusing the 23-year-old of molesting her son.
He's convicted, he's given 15 months in jail, and he's a registered child molester.
Over 2 decades on from his initial conviction, detectives investigating the murder of 21-year-old sex worker Jeray Estep had linked Gordon to her death.
It was a huge story, and the media was all out there. I can remember getting the call, a body's been found on a conveyor belt at a trash recycling facility.
Gordon realizes that the net is beginning to close around him, and he decides to leg it and cuts off his GPS tracker device again and gets on a bicycle and leaves where he's working.
Officers needed to act fast to prevent any more women being murdered at the hands of Stephen Dean Gordon. This killer's story begins on the 3rd of February, 1969, on the west coast of the United States of America.
Stephen Dean Gordon was born in 1969 in Linwood, California, and moved when he was a small child with his family to Norwalk, California, both in Southern California.
It was a pretty itinerant childhood. Originally, they were in one county and then they moved to another.
Santa Fe is a very suburban area south of Los Angeles, very middle class, working class area. He went to high school there.
It seems that he was quite a sickly child. He seemed to have a lot of health problems. It's said that he was bullied at school because of that.
Doesn't sound like he's ever really made any real connections, never really had a good circle of friends who he could count on for support, and just really had low self-esteem as a result.
Gordon's ongoing health issues also had a detrimental effect on his academic life.
He missed an entire year of school due to illness. And when he graduated from high school, he chose not to go any further in terms of education.
When Gordon finished high school, he went to work as a handyman at a large amusement park in the area. While Gordon was working at this amusement park, he developed a relationship with one of his coworkers.
The park was a world-famous attraction and a popular destination for families with children. Gordon had been working there for 4 years before he faced a run-in with the law.
In the early 90s, his sister accused him of sexually assaulting her child.
At first, Gordon admitted to the crime against his own nephew. But then he went on to say he was actually innocent.
He claimed that his girlfriend had been the one to force him to actually even plead guilty when he didn't do anything at all.
After that, he threatened his sister's life for filing those charges against him.
Gordon was 23 years old at the time.
It was a strange thing to do, but if he was sexually attracted to children, it may have been difficult for him to get access to any children other than members of his own family. So maybe he had a rapport, the child knew him, he was able to maybe threaten the child to keep quiet.
Gordon was convicted and sentenced to 15 months in prison. The 23-year-old was also registered as a child molester.
When he was released, he tried to live a somewhat normal or law-abiding life.
Despite blaming his girlfriend for making him admit to the crime, in 1995, the couple went on to get married.
By 1997, they have a daughter. And 2 years later, in the late 90s, they moved to Riverside, California.
There were a lot of problems in their marriage and just in his life in general. He was becoming more and more irritable as the days went on because of a variety of financial and domestic issues.
His wife is trying to keep him going. He's threatening to kill himself or hire a hitman, of all unlikely things, to kill him so that she can get the insurance money. It's slightly bizarre.
I think this shows how out of control he felt in life, how powerless to influence things, certainly to his own advantage. Everything was a drama, a catastrophe for him.
Things slowly started to unravel in their marriage. His wife noticed that he had a terrible problem with anger. The smallest thing would get him upset. And she'd had enough. By 2001, she took their daughter, she left him, and she filed for divorce. When the divorce proceedings started, there was an order in place that he was not to have contact with his wife or daughter.
Gordon violated that order in August 2001 by turning up where he knew they would be.
When they go to church, he tempts the daughter into his car, which is repainted and put new false number plates on. And essentially, he abducts them. Fairly terrifying in every way.
Gordon lured his daughter in with sweets, then threatened his ex with a stun gun, forcing her to get into his car.
He ties the wife up and subjects her to some kind of ordeal.
He let his guard down at one point, and he allowed his wife to make a call. She called her parents, and they, of course, called police.
It doesn't take long for the police to arrive, and indeed, Gordon is charged with 2 counts of kidnapping, wife and daughter.
Stephen Dean Gordon was found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. He would go on to spend 8 of those years behind bars, and in February 2010, he was released. The 41-year-old headed to Orange County, California, an area with high rates of homelessness and poverty.
Anaheim and Santa Ana are the 2 most populated cities in Orange County. In 2013, 3 women completely disappear off the streets of Santa Ana. The first one disappears. About 20 days later, another woman disappears. About 20 days after that, another woman disappears. They're all from Santa Ana. They all worked as prostitutes.
No one's certain that anything's happened to them. They could just have decided to give up or go to another state or do something different.
The first woman to be reported missing was 20-year-old Kiana Jackson.
She was originally from Willits, California, in the Northern California area. She did go to college after high school, but after one semester, she decided she wanted something a little more exciting, and she moved to Las Vegas.
Whilst living in Las Vegas, Kiana had started earning money by becoming a sex worker.
In October 2013, Kiana Jackson took a bus from Las Vegas to the Anaheim area so that she could attend a court date for a previous prostitution charge.
She checks into a hotel on her way to court. She never gets to court. She disappears, literally into thin air.
Her mom at the time said she didn't know her daughter was working as a prostitute. She filed a missing persons report with police, but police said to her that she's an adult, so really our hands are tied. There's not much that we can do.
The lifestyle of a sex worker is transient by nature. They often move around and they don't have any records and they don't sign a lease for an apartment. They often live on the street, and it's very difficult to know whether one of these missing women has just gone on the run or whether some harm has come to them.
17 days after Kiana Jackson went missing, on October the 23rd, 2013, another sex worker disappeared from the streets of Santa Ana. 34-year-old mother of three, Josephine Monique Vargas.
She had just attended a birthday party of a family member and then said she was going to walk to the store to pick up some items, but they never saw her again. Initially, her husband thought that she was still with her family, and then her family thought she was with her husband, so there was a little bit of a delay before reporting that she was missing.
The family of Josephine Vargas got out there on the street. They had missing persons flyers with Josephine's face on it, and they were putting these flyers up all around the neighborhood.
She's disappeared. They realise, and the police acknowledge, that there's been no activity on her credit card or on her bank card. She's just gone.
Fellow sex worker, 27-year-old Martha Anaya, had seemingly known the missing woman. 10 years on, Martha's eldest daughter, Melody, recalls that time.
She did mention to me, one of my friends is missing. I believe that friend might have been Josephine Monique Vargas, because it was around the time that, that she had gone missing. I was 12 years old. My sister was 4, about to turn 5. My mom was very close in age to me. She was only 15 years older than me, so I feel like we would be able to joke around a lot. She's like a best friend.
20 days after Josephine went missing, on the 12th of November 2013, Melody's mother, Martha, sent a text message to her boyfriend before going out to work that day. Her family were unaware of what Martha was doing for work.
We grew up in Santa Ana. I mean, Santa Ana's known to be not the greatest city in Orange County. I would say that back then, Harbor was known to have a lot of prostitution.
Harbor Boulevard in Santa Ana was where many sex workers would wait for business. Martha Anaya was one of these women and felt safe being on the streets there at night.
One time, me and my mother were walking. It was around 8 o'clock at night, and I was like, "You don't ever get scared walking alone at night?" And she's like, "No, because I know how to fight." She wasn't scared of anything.
When Martha didn't turn up the day after she'd messaged her boyfriend about going to work, her family knew something was wrong. Martha would message her mother, Linda, regularly throughout the day.
Que algo malo había pasado, porque ella no dejaba media hora sin llamarme, un mensaje, mamá, ¿cómo estás?
Linda then had a tough decision to make: how to tell her 12-year-old granddaughter that something was wrong.
I had gotten home and my grandma was sitting at the table and she was crying. And I was like, "Why is she crying?" And finally she told me, "I haven't heard from your mom all day."
Tuve que hablarle con la verdad, que su mamá estaba desaparecida, porque aunque ella era muy joven, ella tenía que saber qué es lo que estaba pasando con su mamá. Muy difícil. Muy difícil porque no nada más dejó a Melody, dejó una niña que es Deisha, de 5 años. Y era muy difícil para mí estar buscando a su mamá durante 6 meses.
Martha was last seen in Santa Ana as well. It was really sad because the family had just had a very typical day with her before. They were running errands, everything seemed normal, but she left her home without her belongings and was never found again.
Martha Anaya's family started posting flyers around the area. In the space of 5 weeks, 3 sex workers had disappeared from the streets of Santa Ana. None of them had been found.
It's very stressful to not know what had happened to your loved ones, especially to your mom, who you're used to seeing every day. We did have that mind that, you know, there was a possibility that she wasn't with us anymore, but we did have hope.
On March the 14th, 2014, in Anaheim, the neighboring city to Santa Ana, workers at a recycling plant were shocked to discover something unusual on one of the conveyor belts.
It's an extraordinary thing to happen. But it's clearly a body, it's clearly a woman, and she's clearly met an untimely end.
Local reporter Eileen Freur remembers finding out about the discovery.
That was big news. That was big attention because it's not often you have a body dump in Anaheim. So I think that's what gathered the attention.
Investigators struggled to identify who the woman was. The body didn't belong to any of the 3 missing sex workers. A tattoo on her neck was checked against a database held by police.
It wasn't until the detectives started investigating and doing really good police work to make that connection and identify the body as being that of Dre Estep.
Dre Estep, 21, originally from Modesto, California, was living in Anaheim, and she had a previous prostitution arrest in Oklahoma.
Dre was somebody who also frequented the Southern California area and was known for her sex crimes and was actually well known to the police for this reason.
Dre Estep was now the 4th sex worker known to have gone missing from the area in 5 months. The 4 cases were now thought to be linked.
Now, the police are looking at something more than simply isolated incidents in this area.
Although only 1 body was found, the fate of the other 3 women seemed clear.
It wasn't long after that police were piecing together that there was a serial killer involved. And then it blew out up, you know, everybody was covering it.
Now that the police think they have a murderer of sex workers, the natural investigative avenue is to go back and look at other male sex offenders that are living or frequenting or working in those areas where these sex workers have gone missing.
With the exact locations the women were picked up unknown, officers would struggle to narrow down whether any particular sex offenders were involved. A breakthrough in the investigation gave them a much-needed lead.
Police examined some of the rubbish that was found around Dre's body on that conveyor belt.
Investigators also found a tube of caulking with fingerprints on it. They ran the fingerprints, it came back belonging to a window installer. They brought them in for questioning, and he said, you know, after finishing a job, he would often throw the waste in a trash bin in Anaheim, right next to a paint and auto body shop.
When police looked at which registered sex offenders had frequented that location, a name immediately came up: Frank Cano.
Frank Cano was born in 1986 in California. He had eczema and asthma as a child, rather sickly. The family are not rich. They moved to a trailer park in 1994. They're not conventional suburban.
Frank Cano was also a convicted child predator, a convicted pedophile.
something is going on in Cano's mind. And believe it or not, in 2006, at the age of 20, he molests his 9-year-old niece.
When the police arrived, Cano told police that he molested his niece because he was sexually frustrated, he was a virgin, and he was unpopular with girls.
Frank Cano had pleaded guilty to 1 count of child sexual abuse and received a 2-year sentence. After being in prison for 16 months, Cano was released on parole in October 2009. Now, in April 2014, 4.5 years after his release for the child abuse conviction, Cano had been linked to the body found on the conveyor belt at the recycling plant.
He had been in the area of that trash bin, and he had also been in the area where Jeray Estep's cell phone last pinged, the last call that she made.
Investigators wanted more evidence that Cano was involved before they could bring him in for questioning.
They have Cano under surveillance, and they also get the permission to wiretap his cell phone. So they can listen to the calls, they can look at his text messages, and what the police say they discover is just chilling.
The text messages found on Frank Cano's phone showed that he hadn't been acting alone. In the 4.5 years since his release from prison, Cano had struck up a bond with another sex offender. And what they had done together in that time was truly horrific.
When the police did their analysis, they realized that Frank Cano was in the same area as each of the 4 missing women when they went missing.
Text messages uncovered on Cano's phone revealed that if he was the killer, he wasn't acting alone.
The conversations between him and another man, many conversations, texts, and the text messages detail their hunt for women.
Investigators were able to identify the second man. He was another convicted sex offender, 45-year-old Stephen Dean Gordon.
Stephen Gordon is one dangerous individual. He's not even like a single offense predator. He's molested children, he's an abductor, he's an all-round predator.
But how had these 2 sex offenders become friends? 12 years before Jeray Estep's body was found and Cano had been identified as a suspect, Stephen Dean Gordon had been sent to jail for kidnapping his wife and daughter. After serving 8 years of his sentence, Gordon was released from prison.
In February of 2010, Gordon is released from prison on parole with several restrictions. 1, that he can't go near his family. 2, that he must wear an ankle monitoring bracelet. And 3, that he can't be present anywhere where children gather. And also, he had to register as an official sex offender.
He was on the sexual predators registry. He had to wear a GPS tracker. He clearly had to check in multiple times with his parole officer a month.
It's very hard for registered sex offenders to find a place to live, to find work, because they're very limited on where they can be. So he manages to get odd jobs at this paint and auto body shop in Anaheim. He lived as a transient, really. He had no place to live. The people at that paint and auto body shop allowed him to sleep in his vehicle out in the back of the business.
It was while working at the auto shop that Stephen Dean Gordon met 23-year-old Frank Cano. Cano was also a registered child molester, and he too had to wear a GPS ankle monitor.
Here you have 2 men, one much older, one 17 years older than the other. They strike up what will become an absolutely extraordinary friendship.
I think they bonded a lot over their childhood difficulties. Cano also suffered from multiple health issues as a child and was also extensively bullied. They were both outsiders. They both didn't feel like they were part of a community. And I think even more so than their possibly shared perversion for sexual predator behaviors,
Gordon was living in a car at the back of the auto shop where he worked. And with Cano struggling to find accommodation, Gordon invited him to live in the vehicle with him.
They both had problems building a stable life for themselves. They were both borderline homeless. The nature of their offending, I mean, they were ostracized from their family networks. They shared this, feeling that the world was against them.
Cano and Gordon lived in a car together for quite a bit of time. On the one hand, that could really stress a relationship, even if you really like the person. But on the other hand, it's also a certain type of bonding.
Their close relationship led them to make a risky decision together.
Gordon and Cano are so close, and they obviously identify with one another given their track records, but they also want freedom. And in 2010, they both cut off their GPS tracking devices and leave for Alabama.
Those ankle bracelets give almost an immediate notification when they're cut off. And so they didn't last long on the run and ultimately were apprehended by federal agents in Alabama.
They got caught, of course. They were brought back. They did some time.
Gordon and Cano were both sent back to prison for 5 months for breaking the terms of their parole. But that didn't make them change their ways. And in 2012, 2 years after fleeing for Alabama, they repeated the same technique.
Gordon and Cano do the same thing. They do it again. They remove their ankle bracelets and they take off.
This time, they escaped to a very family-themed hotel in Vegas and basically partied it up there.
They were ultimately found at a casino in Las Vegas that kind of specializes in attracting families and children, unlike most of the other hotels and casinos in Vegas. It's not a coincidence that these two sex offenders ended up at the one hotel in Vegas that's known to have a bunch of children running around.
Being that they both have a history of molesting and being a predator to children, it was probably a place that they both felt very stimulated by because there were so many children around and families around. And this is another person for each of them that could share that perversion with and could understand you and wouldn't judge you.
It was 2 weeks before the authorities finally tracked the two sex offenders down on this occasion. On the 8th of May 2012, both Gordon and Cano were arrested for breaking the conditions of their parole.
They're both sentenced to periods in jail. Cano gets 10 months and Gordon gets 8, 1 in state prison, 1 in federal. In a way, that's the cementing this extraordinary, intense relationship between these two men.
Cano and Gordon were back on the streets in early 2013, and the criminal pair were quickly reunited.
They hook up and start spending much more time together, and they start traveling around together.
They're back out. They're still wearing GPS ankle bracelets to be monitored. In Gordon's case, he was being monitored by federal probation, and in Cano's case, he was being monitored by state parole agents.
As part of their parole restrictions, both men were ordered to stay away from other sex offenders, including each other. But as their GPS devices were being monitored by different agencies, Gordon and Cano constantly being in the same location as each other wasn't flagged.
Cano and Gordon were basically living their own altered reality because they were spending almost all of their time exclusively with one another. And they really bounced off of one another in terms of their ideas and their beliefs. And here's this person basically justifying that what you're thinking and what you're planning is okay and maybe even welcomed. which is really scary because they found some kind of community with one another.
Now, after the discovery of Jeray Eastep's body, Cano's text conversations with Gordon provided the police with an insight into the relationship between the two predators.
They examine the phone records between the two men. And in particular, they come up with the chilling remark that Gordon sends to Cano in the wake of the Estep killing. This is the best one yet.
In the text messages, Gordon and Cano referred to the women as cats or kitties.
Gordon thought Jeray was beautiful. He said cat is beautiful in one of his texts. He didn't want to kill her. The text messages between the two are just chilling as they decide whether she's going to live or die.
I think in some ways, Cano and Gordon referring to the women that they hunted and killed as kitties, it was that sort of feeling of predator and prey. So a kitty being an innocent prey. And again, that feeling of establishing dominance and power over these women. Also, I think just points again to the fact that they very much did not really view these women as human beings. They did not have any respect for them, so almost treated them like animals.
It was clear the two men may have been preying on women together before raping and murdering them. Police needed to act fast. They apprehended Frank Cano and then tried to find Stephen Dean Gordon. But Gordon seemed to know they were coming for him.
Police are closing in on the body shop where Gordon works. Gordon senses this, removes his ankle bracelet, hops on his bike, and takes off, fleeing from the police.
A dangerous sexual predator was on the run from the law. Stephen Dean Gordon had a history of removing his GPS ankle monitor and fleeing to other states. The police needed to locate their suspect before he disappeared for good.
The police catch up with him less than a quarter mile away, where he tries to jump off the bike.
He doesn't make it very far. He flies over the handlebars and they arrest him.
Gordon was taken to the station for questioning. Fellow suspect Frank Cano was waiting for a lawyer and therefore not talking to the police. Investigators may have expected the same reluctance to answer questions from Gordon.
After initially saying, "I don't want to talk," he embarks on what amounts to the most extraordinary confession. 13.5 hours of conversation in which he goes into the most elaborate detail of what he and Cano have done to their victims.
They started to hunt down women, in particular prostitutes. They would be cruising up and down Beach Boulevard in Orange County and looking for their victims.
Gordon tells police how he would pick up the woman in his car while Cano was hidden in the back seat. Once they were in the car, Cano would come up from the back seat and overpower the women. They would then take the car and drive the women in the car behind the auto body shop where they were kind of camping out, where the women would then be raped by the two of them. Gordon described how Cano would strangle the women and he would punch them in the stomach to make sure the air got out quicker so that they would die quicker.
They kidnapped them. They raped them. They killed them, and they threw their bodies out.
During the interrogation, Gordon seemed to revel in sharing the details of the 4 murders.
There were times where he would get frustrated with the police for asking him questions about the victims out of order. And he would actually physically rearrange the photographs of the women that they laid out for him so that they were in the order in which he abducted and murdered them. He was actually showing almost a sick pride in what he had done by correcting them and getting it right, because he knew he wanted them to get it right.
There was another shock in store for investigators when Gordon revealed some unexpected information.
He also, during that time, brought up a 5th victim. He said, "You're missing one." The Anaheim police detective said, she didn't want to show shock, but She was shocked. Everyone was shocked because they didn't know that there was another person missing.
No one knows who that was or where it was. There's no evidence, and again, there's no body.
Only one body had been found, but with Gordon's confessions, investigators were sure that all 4 missing women had been killed. Frank Cano and Stephen Dean Gordon were both charged with 4 counts of murder. Melody Anaya remembers being given news about her mother, Martha.
As soon as I found out how my mom was murdered, I couldn't help but to picture like her last moments. It just made me very angry. I had read about how she was the one that fought the most for her life, and the flashbacks of her telling me, I know how to fight, like I'm okay, like nothing's gonna happen to me, came into my head, and it made me think like, wow, you never really think this kind of stuff is gonna happen to you, but there's always that chance.
One of the hardest things Linda had to do was to tell Martha's 5-year-old daughter the truth.
Yo en un tiempo le dije, tu mamá está en México, ella va a venir. Pero ya pasaron los días y tuve que hablar con ella sobre lo que pasó. Tenía 5 años. Muy doloroso. Tanto como la pérdida de una hija y ver que sus hijas se quedan sin su mamá.
Gordon's trial commenced on November the 16th, 2016. The 47-year-old decided to represent himself in court.
But this time, his story changes. He says, no, Cano was responsible for planning this. I was merely following on. I had nothing to do with it. I wasn't the initiator.
This is like the ultimate control for Gordon. He's in control of the courtroom. Everybody's listening to what he has to say. Everybody's watching him. He can call who he wants to the stand. To me, it seemed like he relished in the moment.
During his trial, Gordon blamed his probation officers for not keeping a closer eye on him and tracking him. He believed that they should be monitoring him more carefully.
They both knew that they shouldn't be consorting with each other. They both knew that was a violation of their parole, and they kept doing it anyway. For him to confess to having murdered all these women and then try to blame all these other people for it is a little disingenuous.
Melody Anaya, who was now 15 years old, was living out of the country during Gordon's trial.
I really wish I would have attended. I had a lot to say. He watched women die, so I would have just wanted to express to him like how it affected me, just to let him hear it. I would have just wanted to let that out and let him know, you know, I don't have my mom anymore. My little sister doesn't have her mom anymore.
Es un dolor tan grande, es el dolor más grande de una madre, perder a un hijo, y especialmente cuando hay una nieta en su adolescencia, que es muy difícil.
On December the 15th, 2016, the jury returned their verdict.
It took jurors just about an hour before coming back with a decision on Stephen Gordon. Before the jurors came in, he laughed a little.
The jury don't hesitate in confirming Gordon's guilt. And in a most remarkable outburst, he then says to the court, and I quote, "If you kill people like this in cold blood, you deserve to die." I believed that and went on, "My actions are evil and horrible, and you're going to get your justice very shortly."
On February the 3rd, 2017, Stephen Dean Gordon was sentenced to death.
He doesn't complain at all when he's sentenced to death. In fact, he accepts it. He's sent to death row in San Quentin in California.
Gordon, he got the death penalty, but obviously to me and the other families, that's not fair. Like, you know, we're never gonna get our loved ones back. It'll never really be fair.
Frank Cano was tried separately and in 2022, he was handed his punishment.
Cano finally pleads guilty to the 4 rapes and murders. But he's done a deal with the district attorney that if he confesses and pleads guilty, they won't ask for the death penalty. So he's effectively saying whole life in prison.
Justice may have been served in the eyes of the law, but the families were left with unanswered questions.
The only body that was ever found was Jeray's. The bodies of the 3 other women were never found. They are believed to be in the Brea landfill. And in fact, Martha Anaya's family, that's where they held a memorial for her, was at the landfill. That was the last known place where they believe she is.
¿Cómo te afectó tu vida?
Mucho. Mi vida cambió desde entonces porque mi hija era mi mano derecha. Es un dolor que no acaba.
During his police interview, Gordon had confessed to an additional murder.
The 5th victim was identified as Sable Pickett, 19 years old, from Compton, which is located in Los Angeles County. Her body was never found either.
People like Gordon are evil. They're killing machines. They spend their whole lives doing this until they're caught. That's kind of the easiest way to think of these people. They're just evil personified.
5 women lost their lives at the hands of Stephen Dean Gordon. If he hadn't been caught when he was, there may have been more victims.
I believe he's evil because, he looked these women in the eyes. He saw them take their last breath, and still, that didn't make him feel guilty enough to stop doing that. I'm glad this isn't gonna happen to any other women. The only thing, as selfish as it is, I wish it wouldn't have been my mom, the person that I needed more than anything in this world.
Stephen Dean Gordon sexually molested a child and then formed a bond with another child predator. Working together, they acted out their sick perversions, resulting in abduction, rape, and the murder of 5 innocent women. Stephen Dean Gordon will forever be known as one of the world's most evil killers.